part about being human is being. Just being. Not necessarily being human, but being in the human body. Being with emotions. Being with time as it passes slowly. I mean, really, it's frustrating. I wish it was easier, but it's not. It's actually really hard.
Do you ever wonder if people in power scrub their toilets? I do. It's a strange thought, but we live in such a distorted reality where everybody is made out to be, these people are made out to be as so iconic. It's like, does Vladimir Putin, does he scrub his toilet? Does Donald Trump scrub his toilet? Do all these influencers that we see online that are the equivalent to us, really, to all of us, like, do they scrub their toilets? There's nothing more humbling than having to scrub your toilet. It really brings the humanity out in people. And obviously there's people that are wealthy and, you know, not even wealthy, just people that have access to the type of resources where they pay people to have to do such a thing. But the point that I'm making is that scrubbing your toilet will bring out the humanity in everybody, bring out the reality of the human experience, something that's just a part of personal hygiene. It sounds like such a crass thought, but just think about the reality that the glitz, the glamour, the lights, the camera, the influence, the media, it's somewhat manipulative in how we perceive people and the influence of the message that people have to share. It's such an interesting thought. You ever think about how when you're feeling overwhelmed, tired, angry, or stuck, or just simply not at your best, that's probably the best opportunity for you to pull out your journal and write what's coming up for you. I think that in those moments are when your truth, the rawness of your humanity can come through. And in that truth, there's really nothing to hide behind between you and your writing. Writing is raw. Writing is absolutely raw. And when you're done writing, you can choose to either look at it and just put it away, or you can choose to share your writing with somebody, because that might be therapeutic for you. That might be something that you find to be helpful. Somebody to experience your rawness. Somebody who doesn't have to offer you advice or anything, but just like somebody to just experience you inside of that raw state. That can be really helpful, so that you can essentially just tap into your authenticity and not feel so alone with any thoughts that you have that are maybe conflicting you or having you believe things that aren't necessarily true, but only that you're making true because beliefs are ultimately truth disguised as facts. When you believe something, you believe it because you've made it true. That's a belief. It's something that you've enrolled yourself into thinking is true. It's like, oh, I believe in myself, meaning you think that what you're saying when you believe in yourself is you're telling the truth. You know, you're constantly teaching yourself what you need to learn to create each day. But if you're not, and you're just doing it habitually and ritually, you almost become like a victim to whatever it is that you think is your circumstance. I love how the word ritual is in spiritual, spiritual. Every day is a practice of spirituality, where you become the actuality of a human being that is held down by gravity, you know. And in that experience, the spirituality, the reality of your rituals becomes a day-to-day experience that you live with. And as you live with that ritual becomes your reality. Is that ritual serving your purpose? Is that ritual fulfilling you? Is that ritual an authentic expression of that which you actually are, a shooting star, someone that is constantly raising the bar while simultaneously healing your scars, knowing that you can open that jar and activate the fulfillment of all your abundance. I love that the word dance is in abundance. It's a very interesting thing to think about as you expand your self-awareness. Your self-awareness is ultimately how you thrive. But you have to notice that self-awareness is actually happening, right? It's like you're looking through the world, you're looking at the world, you're looking at your thoughts, you're looking at your doubts, you're looking at all these things. And, you're thinking to yourself, you're either conscious or you're unconsciously thinking to yourself, whatever you're thinking. And it's crazy how much trickery is happening in the human condition. And mainly it's because the self-awareness is not actually self-awareness, it's awareness of everything else. We have an awareness of everything else, right? Somebody was talking about their scrolling habits with me the other day, and it was mentioned as like, oh, I'm a high intensity scroller. I was like, what does that mean? It's like, well, I scroll fast and I scroll hard. And it's just like swipe, 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 swipe. It's like you could go through 300 screens, 300 impressions, 300 visual and audible experiences in less than 5 minutes. It's absolutely insane. It's absolutely insane when you think about it. So is it self-awareness or is it just awareness separated from self? Think about when you don't feel like it, like when you don't feel like doing something. Probably the greatest thing you can do is put your feeling aside. It's like, oh, I don't feel like it. Well, put the feeling aside and do it anyway and see what happens, right? Most of the time, we actually experience a level of dopamine from productivity. It's like, oh, wow, I was productive, or, oh, wow, that felt really good, or, oh, wow, I don't feel like such a write-off. Like, we can be so mean to ourselves because we are so unconsciously with ourselves. We're just distraught and anxious and, living in this state of FOMO, as if there's this fear of missing out on what's happening in the world, what's happening in your community. Your habit to check your phone is a ritual that you have probably noticed is somewhat detrimental, but you are addicted to it. You're addicted to it. It's pretty insane when you think about our behaviors with social media and the internet. I'd say that the planet is going through a codependency to these platforms and these resources. We're, absolutely codependent to it. How do you create a balance between being codependent to all these platforms and actually being entrepreneurial and having to run your business? Right? Like, the balance is in the rest. The balance is in your ritual, your spirituality, the ritualness, the rituals, and your spiritual practices. It's like you do create the balance. You turn it off, you shut it off, you get back to it, except you don't get back to it from like a robotic, like mundane, sleepy sense. You go back to it with intention. And that's even if you're using the internet to build your business. Like, you might have a thriving reputation just from the people in your life that are aware of the value that you bring to the world, right? Somebody interviewed me yesterday, and he asked me, he's like, what do you do? Tell the world, tell my audience what it is that you do. I said, well, I'm an entrepreneur, and as an entrepreneur, I lead from the heart with all things that I do in business. And art, the word art is in the word heart, heartpreneur, artrepreneur. And in that, it's like, okay, whether I'm coaching or consulting or teaching or playing music or speaking or preaching or reaching people, I'm seeking constantly a way to do that from a place of art first, from like, what does the heart want, not the mind. And I noticed that because it's related to art, there's resistance. And the resistance that comes with the war of art is very real for an artist. It's very real for a artist. It's a very real thing, because You want to make your impact contribution. You want to live in integrity. You want to be a person that is contributing to servitude. And ultimately what you're doing is you're living in congruence with your own belief systems. What you've thought yourself to believe is what you've thought yourself to say is true. So you go through your life believing that who you are and what you do is you and your truth. It's when we discover that we're being inauthentic that we realize, oh, wow, inauthenticity is actually a form of raw truth. It's like, wow, I'm being inauthentic and I'm being honest about that. That raw, honest, vulnerable transparency that you discover from your inauthenticity is such a powerful way of discovering whether or not you're living in alignment or congruent to what you believe to be good for you and what you believe to be your truth, the truth that you want, the truth that feels good, not just this passive truth. So I think it's really, really important that you consider that when you're completely fed up with yourself, that you realize that changing what's working is going to require a small pivot. And that can also come with the practice of changing your rituals. And in that small pivot, there's space for joy in that. And I think it's really special for you to consider the possibility of what joy can feel like outside of this rut that you may be, quote unquote, stuck in. When you start to change, the world around you begins to change. Your perspective starts to change. The way you view the world starts to change. And you start to look at things differently because you start realizing that you're feeling differently. And even then, that's when feelings come into play. When you feel good, you want to be living by your feelings. But when you're feeling bad, it's like, I don't want these feelings. That's what we say to ourselves. Like, I don't want to feel this way. I really think that when we remove feeling from the experience, when we remove feeling from how we define our embodiment, and rather just be in the doing or be in the being, it's like, well, feelings will still be there, but they're not what are running the show in that moment. Do you know what I mean? It's a really special experience to detach and disconnect ourselves from our feelings running the show. I know what that's like. I've had to, quote unquote, master my feelings because I'm an emotional, sensible, and sensitive person. So my feelings have been running my life. It's like, oh, how do you feel? Oh, I feel this, I feel that. You know, and it's like, for the most part, like, to feel joy is spontaneous. It's like, whoa, I feel so happy. There's so much happiness that I think this is actually joy, right? Like, joy is something that accumulates in an instant. And it's like, whoa, I'm feeling joyful. You know, there's something really special about accumulating that feeling. But for the most part, we're not feeling joy. You know, you can be grateful and not happy. You can be grateful and not happy. You know, like, that's a thing. So when we think about how everything starts with us, like, we know that we're made up of stardust, the same things that are made of stars. We know that the universe is within us. We know that when we change the way that we look at things, the things that we look at change. We know these things, right? We're in this beautiful experience. Life is this complex paradox. We overcomplicate. And we overcomplicate it because we're just being influenced by so much information, right? But like, when we really go within, like this podcast episode, like, this is me turning on the camera after a moment of inspiration. And I was like, I want to share insights related to things that I've written, and insights related to things that I've thought, and insights related to a spur of the moment conversation with this audience. Because, you know, my message, it's like, I know that I want Coachable to be a school. I know this. Like, that's my dream, is to build like this university for coaches. I also have this dream to regulate the coaching industry. And I also have this dream to bring the coaches of the world together, like, as often as I can, to celebrate life, business, expression, creativity, abundance, servitude, contribution, impact. I have these dreams. And it's like, I'm finding myself very conflicted with how to package the message of this dream. Somebody mentioned it yesterday during the interview. It's just like, you haven't found your through line. And I've heard that term before. And I want to get back to that conversation. The through line. There's something missing from my message because I continue to flip-flop. And I really blame it on the artist in me. But at the same time, it's like the artist in me is the reason why I am what I am. But it's difficult. This week's campaign had the brand aesthetic that I love. It also had the copy. The copy was written as raw, vulnerable, authentic messages that were sourced from God. And it also had rhyme, spoken word, and lyricism in the copy itself, all blended with a training experience to teach people about God and money and the correlation between abundance and self-worth, plus some tips on how to actually have conversations. And I'm realizing, like, maybe this is too much for people to handle. Like, maybe my message is not clear. Maybe when people think of me, all they think about is like this emotional source of intuitive insight. Even that is probably too complicated. So, I turned on the camera for this podcast thinking I'm really just going to share just a little bit of the transparent thought process in relation to the things that I journal about and the things that I write about, the things that I've had breakthroughs around, and just give this conversation some life. Because although I just want to teach all the time, I'm finding that, like, hey, when you went to school, did you do your homework? When you went to school, did you want to go to school? When you went to school, did you feel, fully concentrated? It's like, the concept of school, I think of it as like a community. I think of it as like a flowing conversation. Not just as this place where you go to learn. Like, when you buy an online course and you see all this content, you're like, oh man, I got to do all this content. I got to read all this material. It's like, that doesn't turn people on. Like, very, very few people, unless you package your branding and your marketing so well that it's like, wow, like, I can't wait to learn. Unless you literally influence your customers to be like, oh my God, they made this look so fun to learn. And then they're under the spell of like, I can't wait to learn. Like, yeah, that's a possibility. I think that for the most part, in the age of ignorance and distraction and seemingly limitless information, I think most people, it's like they struggle to learn. They're learning by seeing. They're learning more of like through a visual experience. So it makes it interesting for me because I want to teach and I want to contribute and I want to help. But how do you help people in 3 to 15 seconds? Like, everything's just so fast. And I'm conflicted by it. I'm totally conflicted by it. My humanity's coming to the surface through entrepreneurialism 100%, because I feel like I got to keep up. And I do keep up. I think I do a pretty good job at keeping up, but is it fulfilling? It's not. It's not. It's not fulfilling. It's like a race. And it's I just keep thinking, like, there's got to be another way. And I think I found it through this podcast, even though there's only 60 of you listening, maybe, if you're listening. There's got to be another way. And I really think it has to do with community. But there's a distinction between community and clients that are community, right? Like, there's a community of people that you co-create possibility with. But then there's a separate group that is like, these are people that are your community because they are your clients. So this is your cohort. That's the distinction. It's like, you have your cohorts, which are people that have paid to be a part of these group learning experiences. And then you have your community, which is just people that share common thought, people that love your point of view. And there's a distinction there for you to dance with, for sure. I have a call coming up in 3 minutes, so I'm going to wrap up today's podcast. I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you have any comments about it, feel free to share it. If I said anything of value and you'd like more of it, you can always subscribe. That helps you and it helps me to remain in community together. And as always, it's been a pleasure to have your attention. Stick around. There's a lot more to talk about.